Okay, so we are recording. So welcome everybody, and thank you, Nick, for showing us how to do check in and check out the Catalina 27.
Glad to be here. So, how's everybody doing? Is having fun? Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, but we're all muted because we're recording.
Okay. Well, so I've been messing around. I have a mute on my Bluetooth, and I wanted to make sure it was actually working. So today we're going to go through checking out for the Catalina 27. Probably the biggest difference between the Catalina 27 and the Merit is the Catalina 27 has an inboard engine versus an outboard. So we're going to spend a good amount of time on how to check the inboard engine out, make sure it's in good shape before you go out sailing. Then we'll move to, taking out the mainsail cover and stuff like that is fairly similar. So it's definitely the bulk of it will be on the outboard. And then, of course, the
you mean the inboard?
Catalina. What did I say? The outboard. We'll spend more time on the inboard. So I've been doing a lot of Merit stuff lately, Dana. Okay. So anyway, the Catalina 27 also has an entire electrical panel. So we'll kind of go through that, make sure you know how to use it, and then the bulk of it is you guys asking questions, because that'll be super useful if anything is a little unclear of how to go about doing it. Feel free to ask questions, because if you have questions, I'm sure other people do as well, and it's recorded, so we'll be able to allow other people to learn from your questions. So, as always, operational checklist is our go-to. Make it really easy. Open it up, and we just start right down the line. So the first thing you should do when you come out to the boat, just generally look at the boat, the hull, the rigging, everything on the deck. Make sure that there aren't any scratches, doesn't look like anything's broken. You're really just making sure that everything is, at least from a first glance, looks to be in good shape. Because if it doesn't, of course, then you have to, call whoever's on call, either Seppi or Dana, and then get switched to a different boat. Or maybe they'll tell you that it's not a big deal. But if something looks that far off, it's probably a big deal. So then really the next thing you should do is go right down and check the bilge. So the bilge on all these Catalinas should be pretty dry. This one's actually completely dry, so that's really good. There shouldn't be any oil.
Nick, can you repeat that? You're breaking up a little bit.
Those pumps, they should work. Really? How do you guys read me?
So we can see you fine now. I think it just broke up for just a second there.
Okay. So the Catalinas have automatic bilge pumps. So when you come down here, there really shouldn't be, the amount of water you might see in a Merit, because the Merit only has a manual bilge pump. So you shouldn't have to manually pump out a Catalina 27. The only time that there might be an issue is if the person before you didn't put the bilge pump. So actually on this one, the bilge pump switches over here. This should always be in the auto mode. It says auto, and it should just always be over in auto mode. If it's in auto, don't touch it. Just leave it that way. It should always be in auto mode.
Hey Nick, could you explain about that toggle switch, how it's a 3 toggle?
Sure. So when it's all the way to the left, it's going to be in the auto mode. So whenever enough water gets in the bilge pump turns on, pumps the water out, turns off. If you're in the middle, that's off. that's really bad, because if there's any water coming into the boat through a leaky fitting, or if there's a leak in the deck and there's a lot of rain, the boat might sink. The other one is manual, and that's usually not on all switches, but on most switches, you can't leave it in manual. That's because if you run a pump dry, you can ruin the bearings. So they're usually made so you have to hold it in manual mode. That's really just to test the action of the pump. There's really no reason to run it in manual. Or sometimes your float switch, it's the thing that tells the pump that the water's high. That might malfunction, and then you can use manual to at least pump out the water, and then you can repair your float switch. But for your purposes, all you have to remember is auto. Keep it on auto. Okay, so that's the bilge and the bilge pump. So on the checklist, the next thing up is the mainsail, but we're going to jump right into the engine just because we're down here. So the first part to get into the engine is you take the ladder, companionway ladder off, and you put it to the side. And then you open up, oh, you got it, yeah. Then you open up the engine compartment. I can actually. And here's the engine, it's on in all of its glory. So the first thing you should be looking at initially, you can check the fan belt tension. So this thing, this is just right. You know, it deflects a little bit, but not too much. You can probably depress it maybe an inch or so. Any more than that, it's going to be too loose and it's going to slip. Any tighter than that, and you're going to have a lot of excess wear. So. So the thing that sometimes throws people off is how to check the fuel level. The fuel level on most of these Merits is actually below the quarter berth. So you gotta lift up this thing and you see the fuel tank. And this is the fuel level gauge. And you can see it's about 3/4 full. So as long as you have about, really anything more than about a quarter tank, you're going to be good. Uh-oh. And then, yeah. So as long as you have about more than a quarter tank, you'll be good for, if you're just doing a day charter. These diesel engines, they only burn, maybe 3/4 of a gallon an hour. So they're very, very fuel efficient. So after you check the fuel, the next thing you should do is turn the master battery switch. At Spinnaker, we like to turn the master battery switch to either 1 or 2, depending on the day of the week. So today is the 9th of June, so we're going to turn it on 1. If it was the 10th, we turn it on 2. So 2 for even days, 1 for odd days. We just do that because if we run the engine always on all, we won't know if the one of the batteries is starting to go bad. So once we turn on the master switch, you're going to see all of these switches, they're going to start to work. So you want to make sure that they're all off right now, because that'll make engine start easier, because there's not going to be a load on the engine. Also, it's just good practice to have them all in the off position. So the next thing, you check the actual engine. So probably the most important part of the engine when you're looking at it is this valve right down here. This is the raw water intake valve. And you see this hose goes up here to the raw water pump. The raw water comes up into the engine and goes through a heat exchanger, and that cools down the coolant, just like the air cools down the coolant on the radiator in your car. If there's no water coming through this raw water pump, 2 things happen. First, this pump almost immediately gets destroyed. It's made of very, very delicate silicone. And if it doesn't have water on it for more than, a couple seconds, the silicone just gets way too hot and it falls apart. Then, if you run the engine a little bit longer with no raw water, your engine will overheat because there's no way for the coolant to cool down. And that can cause a whole host of problems, as anybody who's had their car engine overheat knows. So it's super important that you check to make sure that this valve is open. Also, once you're done with your charter, we don't close these valves. It's the only valve on the boat we're going to keep open because it's so important for the raw water to be able to get to the engine. So just
Nick,
make sure this.
Can you show us what it looks like when you open and close it, like what the difference is?
Sure.
And maybe grab the phone from Ian because I think it's probably hard.
So let's see. This is closed, and this is open. So open is in line with the hose. Closed is perpendicular to the hose. And that's how all of the valves on the boat work. When they're in line, they're open, and when they're perpendicular, they're closed. Thank you. So the next thing is that we're going to check the oil. So it's just like your car, the engine needs to have oil as lubricant. On most of these, this one actually has a fuel filter in the way. A lot of these you can kind of stick your hand back here and grab this fairly easily. This one's kind of, you can still get it, but there's this fuel filter in the way, so you gotta kind of come around, Now, before you
just to note to everyone that on Catalina 4 specifically, the dipstick is located in a really tricky spot. And so we actually don't want you checking the oil on Catalina 4 because the dipstick just is too tricky to put in and out. So we do it ourselves during the week. Our maintenance guy does that during the week. So. Nick, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right. So when you take this out, you want to, as much as possible, keep oil from spilling everywhere, but sometimes it's kind of hard. What you definitely want to do is once you get the dipstick out, wipe the dipstick completely dry. You can also look at the oil and make sure that there aren't any like metal particles. If the oil kind of has a weird smell to it, that can be bad too. If you see water droplets in it, that's really bad. And then also if it's really thin. So diesel oil, unlike gasoline engine oil, actually is supposed to get dark. Obviously, if you saw this in your car as your engine oil, you'd be really, really worried. Diesel burns at a lot higher temperature. It causes a lot of soot. So it's completely normal for the oil to be black. What you don't want is to be thin. Thin oil means that it's really been run a lot, and it's not helping the engine as it should lubricate. So for your purposes, what you're going to be most worried about is that the level's right. So after you wipe the oil right down, then you have to put it back in, which is, like I said, a little bit harder on this one. You got to kind of feel back there for where the entrance is, and then you can stick it in. Pretty much all the other Merits, it's much easier because there isn't a fuel filter. Merit one's,
right?
See, I've just been doing so many Merits. It's
Also, while you're doing that, Nick, can you describe to us what it looks like when there's water in the oil?
Yeah, so water and the oil, if you've ever tried to mix oil and water together, it's the same thing. So So if you look here, this is really good oil. It's dark, but it's uniform in color. You know, it's not thin. If you put it between your fingers, it has that nice greasy feel to it. If you have water, you're gonna see little droplets of water actually on there. Some people think that you can take the oil cap off and check for water droplets there, but condensation can occur too, so that's not the best way. What you're really looking for is, you know, little droplets of water on the dipstick.
I've actually had it look like mayonnaise, so that's how I.
Oh yeah, so but that's only if you run it. So if the engine's been run recently, the oil will be moving around, and if anybody has made, if you cook a lot, you can actually kind of mix oil and water together and makes a frothy mixture. You'll see the exact same thing on your dipstick, but that's only after the oil engine's been run. If it's been sitting for a while, you'll just get those little droplets, or sometimes you won't even get anything at all, depending on how bad the water is. Of course, if it's really, really bad, you'll have the thing where the very bottom of the dipstick won't have any oil, because that's actually where the water was. But that's really, really bad. So probably won't ever get to that point.
And what should they do if they see anything other than normal oil on the dipstick?
Don't go out on this boat. Call Dana or Seppi and get a different boat, because when your oil is bad, even just running the engine for a couple minutes without proper oil can really ruin a lot of things. We have 7 different Catalinas. They're rarely all out on the same day, so it's much better to switch to a different one, and then you'll be on your way without worrying about the whole engine getting destroyed. So in addition to the oil, the other important fluids, so basically you can think of the 3 important fluids on the engine. One's fuel. That's pretty easy. We just make sure we have it. The other is oil. Make sure that it's in good shape, doesn't have water or metal or other stuff in it. The last one's coolant. So coolant, on some of the Catalinas, the overflow tank is actually up in the lazarette. On this one, it's right here. Makes it really easy. You can actually see, I don't know if you can in Zoom, but you can actually see the water line. If you can't see it, you can always...
Sorry to interrupt, but it was my understanding that most of the overflow tanks weren't actually connected to the reservoir. And so Bob used to tell me that we should just check the reservoir. But I'm not sure if that one is connected or not.
I mean, it's, oh no, that one's not connected. Oh, cause I think the Catalina 28s might be connected.
Yeah, and the one on the 34 definitely is.
Yeah. So what you want to do is actually check the So this is the actual reservoir for the coolant.
I think that one has a lever at the top that you have to flip up. There you go.
That allows it to...
And then push down.
Push down on the lever?
No, so pull the lever up and then push down and twist on the cap.
There you go. So the way we check the level of the coolant on these is you just stick your finger in, and if you can feel coolant, then you're good. Technically, coolant should have like a certain you know, density, but as long as we have coolant, you know, we switch the coolant out fairly often. So as long as there is coolant in there, we're good. The important part with checking the coolant is making sure you put the coolant cap back on.
I'm pretty sure you have to make sure the lever is up when you put it back on, and then when you're ready to cinch it down, then you put the lever down. Guys, just so you know, Catalina 1 is the only one that has that special coolant cap thing. And so then that one does have a danger of not getting seated correctly.
Yeah. There you go. So that's pretty much all you have to check on the engine. Those three main fluids. So after you have all the fluids checked, you can actually start the engine up. Put the ladder back in place. Oh, the wind's cooled down, kind of died down. So Catalina 1 is definitely just a little bit different than the rest of them. So pretty much all the other Catalinas have both the shifter and the throttle on the steering quadrant. Catalina 1 has them down here. But they work the same whether they're up here or down here. That's forward, this is neutral, and this is reverse. When we start the engine, we want to be in neutral, and we want the throttle to be down or maybe just slightly open. We don't have any keys on the Catalinas, but we do have is an ignition kind of switch. And we turn that on and we hear this loud buzzing sound. The reason why the loud buzzing sound comes on is because it's a low oil pressure. It's kind of a test. If that buzzing sound doesn't come on, it means that the low oil pressure whole system doesn't work. And that's something that you should, tell Dana or Seppi about. Because it's an important thing. As soon as you have low oil pressure, you want to know immediately. Of course, the engine isn't on right now, so there shouldn't be any oil pressure, but it's just a little check that you can do. So after you turn on the ignition, the next thing is to press in the glow plug. Diesel engines don't have spark plugs. They work just because of the high compression of the fuel and air mixture in the cylinders. When they're cold, even though that compression isn't enough to actually start and create a combustion, so you need to have a little element get really, really hot that gives a little extra energy, start the combustion going, and then once it's going, it keeps going. So you can press the glow plug for about 10 or 15 seconds. Turn glow plug off. You press the ignition. Now that oil low pressure or low oil pressure should go off within 5 seconds or so of starting up the engine. If it doesn't for whatever reason, try advancing the throttle a little bit, because sometimes you need a little bit more throttle to get that oil pump going. But if still no oil pressure comes up, then definitely shut down the engine immediately and call Dana or Seppi. The other thing you should do right away is make sure that there's water coming out. So you should see that splashing of water. If there's no water splashing, that means that raw water loop that we were talking about, there's something wrong with it. And again, we talked about all the bad things that can happen when you don't have raw water. So again, turn off the engine immediately, call Dana or Seppi. So,
I also just wanted to make a note that that alarm that goes off is low oil pressure and also tells you that the engine is overheating. So if you're out on the water motoring and that alarm goes off, it could be low oil pressure, but it's probably because the engine is overheating, and you should turn the engine off immediately if that happens while you're underway.
Yep. And yes, another reason to make sure that the alarm works before you leave the dock. So, what else do you have to say about the Yeah, so then what I like to do at this point, especially, if you haven't been on the Catalinas for a while, you should get in the habit of doing this whenever you're on a new boat that you're, unfamiliar with. Bring the throttle down to idle. always shift and idle. You never want to be shifting with any throttle. And go ahead and put the transmission into reverse. We're tied up to the dock right now, so the boat's not going to move. Get a little bit of throttle in reverse. Maybe like 1,000 RPM, 1,200 RPM. And then what you can do is look over the side of the boat. So on this side, the water's pretty quiet. Not getting knocked around at all. There's no bubbling or turbulence. Let's look at the starboard side. Whoa, look at all that. I don't know, can you see it on the screen? See how the water's getting pushed around and stuff? That tells you that when you go into reverse, prop block is going to push the stern to port. So really easy way to figure out which way your stern is going to get pushed before you leave the dock. And you can kind of, internalize that because, I'd say about 70 or 80% of boats do walk to port when they're put in reverse, but there's a handful of ones that have a left-hand propeller and they walk the opposite way. And that's really surprising to figure out at the wrong time. So the other thing, you want to check forward. Just make sure you put into forward. You start moving forward. It looks like we do, so that's great. The other thing that the checklist points out, this ignition switch, we can turn it off and the engine will actually continue running. But we don't want to do that. When the ignition switch is off, all those alarms, all your gauges on here won't work. Most importantly, though, that alarm won't work. So what Dana was just talking about, the low pressure and high temperature alarm, that won't work if your ignition switch is off. So then you won't know if there's a problem. On our Catalinas, which is kind of unique, we have an actual electric fuel pump. It's paired to this ignition switch. If you turn this ignition switch off, your engine will actually shut off in about 5 minutes because it won't get fuel to it. But that's kind of unique to our Catalinas.
I actually had a charterer call me once and he said, the engine keeps dying on me every 5 minutes, and I turn it back on, it works, and then I finally figured out after talking to him it was because after he would start up the engine, he would turn off the ignition switch. So.
Yeah, and I really don't know why. I think because it does make that loud alarm sound, but just remember that alarm sound is a really good thing. That alarm sound means that you're protected if something goes wrong, because as soon as it goes off and you're actually have the engine on, to turn off the engine and try to troubleshoot. So now if you actually do want to turn off the engine, all you have to do is pull up on the shutoff valve. So I forgot, Dana, do these stop the air or the fuel?
It shuts off the fuel. So
so on some old diesels, this shutoff valve was literally just shutting the air off. But pretty much all the new ones, as soon as you pull it, it shuts down the fuel, engine stops, so now the low oil pressure, high tempo come on. Now we can turn up the ignition and the engine's off. So when you're going out for charter, unlike the Merritts, where we really don't want you to idle the outboard for a long time at the dock, it's actually a good idea to idle the diesel. You don't want to idle it for 30 minutes because that's actually not good for a diesel. It likes to be run at RPM, but it's definitely fine to turn on the engine and then go about taking off the sail cover, doing any last minute things, letting that diesel engine warm up to temperature before you go out. It's good for the engine. It also, if the engine has any issues with it, you'll find out at the dock and not when you're on the water, hopefully. So.
I had a quick question. This is Jeff talking here, and that is, if the engine isn't running and I leave the ignition switch on, will I burn up the alternator? Is that what the danger is with that?
Oh, the engine isn't.
I had actually heard that and I was going to ask Nick this, but it had been my understanding that if you turn the ignition switch off while the engine is running, that it can burn up the alternator.
Okay.
Yeah, well, and that kind of depends on how things are wired. I don't know why any of you guys might do this, But while we're talking about burning out alternators, remember the main battery switch that we looked at earlier, and you can switch it to 1, all, or 2. If you switch that battery switch from 1 to all, to 2, or to off, some people say it's okay to do it idle. Some people say it's okay to do from like 1 to all, but not from 1 to 2. Pretty much everybody agrees if you turn it off, bad things will happen. Best thing to do is just don't touch that switch when the engine's on. If for some reason you do need to change that switch from 1 to 2, I don't know why. But if you feel like you have to when you're on the water, turn the engine off first and then change the switch, because that is something that will definitely ruin the alternator. So.
And it only takes a like not even a second to do that.
Yeah.
So.
It's really just because really, I mean, I think what happens is that if you're at idle and you switch it and everything's grounded properly and wired correctly, then technically it should be able to handle it. But you know, these boats aren't brand new, and even if everything is correct, it could still kind of cause a voltage jump, and that can burn out the alternator. So
yeah. So from what I understood when I talked with Bob about it, Nick, was that, I mean, this is probably a whole course on just alternators.
how to burn out an alternator.
But that, you know, there's so much, I don't know if it's amperage or voltage that's coming out of the.
When you unload it, you're going from unloaded to unloaded. Because inductors resist changes in current, they spike the voltage really high. So when you unload the battery from on to off, you get an inductive kick from the alternator, just spike the voltage and kill things.
Right.
That makes sense, because now you don't have the voltage drop over the entire system, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, cool. See, we're all learning things. This is great. So, okay, so that's pretty much the engine. Are there any questions on the engine? Because that's pretty much the whole, initial pre-check, startup, shutdown procedure. Okay. Well, so the rest of the stuff is just checking the wobbles.
Oh, I think it's probably a comment on maybe trying to keep the camera steady.
Oh.
I was getting a little sick too.
Well, it's actually fairly windy down here, so it is kind of.
I think it was just because we were looking at the engine and stuff like that. Oh wait, no. Right. Peter is saying 7 checks for diesel engines is wobbles. So Peter, why don't you enlighten us what that stands for? Or Nick, do you know what that is?
Yeah, I could probably take a hot guess, but Peter, why don't you let us know?
Okay, I'll read it because he's being shy. So number 1 is water.
Okay.
Number 2 is, I'm guessing, oxygen, but he hasn't written it yet.
Oil.
Oh, oil. Okay.
And then, what would B be? Battery?
Yeah. What was the second B? Batteries, yes. Belts.
Belt. Yeah.
I think L should stand for lasers. Leaks. Okay, leaks.
That's good. And then E.
Probably electricity. Exhaust.
Exhaust. That's pretty good.
All right,
I like those acronyms.
One more S. What's S?
Seacop?
Weird sound. Well, thank you for that, Peter.
Yeah, that's acronyms are a great way of, especially in the heat of a moment. It's a good way to, remember things. And when you're doing a check all the time, it's a good way to just kind of internalize that kind of stuff. Thanks, Peter. So, all right. So the equipment that the Coast Guard requires is pretty much the same as on a Merit, because we're on a Catalina right now. PFD for each person, they're basically in the same place as they are in the Merit, in the quarter berth. A whistle or horn. So in the Catalinas, we should.
It's that big orange thing.
Which one?
That's it.
Actually.
Oh, don't do it. It's so loud. They're so loud, Nick.
I thought we actually. So I've actually never used one of these.
Yeah, they're really loud. I heard one.
Oh, well.
Yeah, so you guys can experiment with it on your own time, but just know that that is a horn and it's very loud.
So then we also have the visual distress signals. So the main ones are these flares. Big thing to check on here is the expiration date. So you see there's 2 dates on here. One's the manufacturing date. That's obviously going to be always earlier than present day. The expiration date is the one you want to look at. That needs to be later than present day. If it's not, go up to the office, get some new ones. If there's nobody in the office, you can call Dana and Seppi, and they'll figure it out. If you guys gotten the kind of general trend, if anything's wrong, you can call Dana or Seppi, right? So. Okay, so visual signaling devices. I also noticed that there's this locator flag. I've actually never seen. The Catalina 1 has a lot of surprises. This isn't a required thing, but I guess you could use it. So, looks kind of old. So then you also need to have a throwable PFD, which is that big yellow horseshoe. It's just like the ones we have on the Merits. On the Catalinas, we also have what's called a life sling. So really, to use that is fairly straightforward. It has the instructions on the back of it. But that is a really useful way to get people out of the water if they're unconscious, or if for whatever reason they can't climb up the ladder on the Catalinas. Now, Catalina should have 2 fire extinguishers. Merits only have 1, but Catalinas are a little bit bigger. So they should have 1, which is right here. And then the other one should be in the lazarette, right?
Yep.
One of these. Oh, yeah? Yep. And so if there was a fire in the engine room, you'd probably want to make sure you use the one back here, because you wouldn't want to go below deck when there's a fire. Not only could that be really dangerous, but the fumes alone, even if it doesn't look like this fire in the saloon area, just, the fumes, can be dangerous. So. Let's see. And then the registration looks the same as the Merits. Make sure you have it. That's pretty much all. And then the last thing is different than the Merits, because these Catalinas, we do allow them out at night. I'm not sure, Dana, are they allowed out at night right now, or what's the current status?
No, they're not. They're not allowed out at night ever. But you should. If you find yourself in a situation where you have to return to Spinnaker in reduced visibility or at night, it is important. Your camera turned off, by the way. Oh no, he dropped from the call. Well, does anybody have any questions while we wait for him to come back?
Maybe he's just testing night.
This is what it looks like when it's night, yes. So, oh, here he comes back.
It's crazy, it kicks me out.
Okay. It's just connecting back now.
Sorry, my mom was calling. Okay, there we go. Apparently, when you get a call on your phone, Oh, can you hear?
Oh, shit.
Alright. Okay, so we were going over the running lights. If you do want to test them, it's this top switch up here. You just turn that on. The other thing, it's not in the, well, actually, it might be in the checklist as we go through here. Departure.
I also want to make a comment about the things that you're looking for in the boat. Can we talk about flashlights? Can you point over to where the flashlights are?
Sure.
You have to have one flashlight. Now, I would like to point out that that puck-looking thing is also a flashlight. You just have to cycle through the different things.
Almost. Almost.
No, wait a minute. There's a way to make it a flashlight, Nick.
No, I think it's a press and hold. Or that's, no, wait. Press twice quickly. Well, but that's the orange one. Press twice quickly for LED flashlight.
In any case.
There we go.
If you just see the puck, you still have a flashlight.
Yeah. Now, how do I turn it off? Press and hold. There we go. Solved it. Okay. But you should also have a normal flashlight. A lot of these have the batteries flipped around. This one doesn't have the batteries flipped around, so that means the batteries are dead. So we'll go ahead and put that up in the office. Get some new or you want to just tell, we'll let Ian know. Okay. And then before you leave, checking all your equipment, make sure you take your winch handle and you put it out there so it's easy to use. Let's see. Oh yeah. So you should also have a bilge pump handle, which I just saw.
It's on the countertop. Oh, never mind.
Bilge pump handle. Like I said, though, that's really only used if your electric bilge pump goes out. So it's unlikely you'll have to use that. Catalina should have 2 fenders, one on either side, unlike the Merit where they only have 1. You should have a first aid kit, just like you do on the Merit. And we'll talk about the chart back here. So with the Catalinas, you know, the keel draws a little bit more, so it's a little bit deeper in the water. And you might be going further on a Catalina, you know, past the San Mateo Bridge. So it's really important, you know, it's important on the Merit too, but on the Catalina, make sure you have a chart app on your phone. Something like iNavX, Navionics, CAQ. There's a lot of different ones. Make sure you have one that actually gets the NOAA charts. It's not good enough to have Google Maps. That doesn't tell you how deep the water is. It only tells you where you are. So make sure you have an actual, you know, NOAA charts enabled chart plotter app on your phone. It's really great because it overlays where you are, shows you exactly how deep the water should be, and then you can use that to navigate and avoid shallow areas. So that's pretty much all the equipment except for one, which is the anchor. So let's go up and talk about the anchor. And then we'll be pretty much done because the rest of this is very similar to the Merit. So the anchor, unlike the Merit where it's stuffed in a lazarette somewhere, the anchors on the Catalina are actually in this cockpit locker. So you usually need to have somebody else to hold it open. Sometimes you can kind of, oh, careful, don't go too far. Don't go too far. You can use a rope to kind of keep the hatch open a little bit. But you can see the anchor is similar to the one in the Merit. It's sized slightly bigger. I still wouldn't trust my life with it. It's not that big, but it's more than enough that, you know, this is why we do the Catalina 27s for BCC class, because it's more than enough to practice anchoring. It gives you a good idea of how to anchor. You know, you really shouldn't have to use the anchor. So most people just go out sailing and come back. But it's a really good idea to remember you have one if your engine dies. Especially if your engine dies and it's a windy day, if you can get up here and throw the anchor overboard before you drift into the shallows, it'll make saving you a lot easier. We won't have to get you off of the ground. It'll just be towing you back into the marina. Now, important thing is, make sure when you do deploy the anchor, you know, you do so carefully, and you tie it off to something before you throw it overboard. So most of these should already be tied off to something inside the cockpit locker, but don't count on that. So make sure you tie it off to some cleat or something before you throw it overboard. But you guys should have learned all this in the BCC class, so I won't go too much into it.
Just also a small note that that the deck fitting for the holding tank and a lot of the Catalinas,
Right.
it's located inside the anchor locker, a lot of times underneath like a lot of the anchor road. I think Catalina 1 actually has it on deck. So that one, where is it inside? Did you see it in there?
Well, it's hard to see. I don't see it on deck, actually. Wait,
Oh.
I see two things, diesel and, nope,
No,
water.
back there is water, yeah. But I think Ian had it before. Ian, I think where you were looking before is actually where it was on Catalina 1.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. Yep. So do we want to talk about pumping out, Dana?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, pumping is out the best part. So pumping out is something you have to do if you use the head. Well, actually, let's go talk about the head then.
And while he's walking back, I might just mention too that whenever you take anybody on board, no matter if you intend to use the restroom or not, I would highly recommend just briefing them on how to use the head, mostly because you never know, and I've had it that people they get really shy about asking about it, and they'll use it in secret. And you think, how could they use it in secret? Like, it's a small boat. Like, how does that even work? And you would be surprised, like, that it ends up getting used. The skipper doesn't know it, and then they don't even check the bathroom. They don't even check the head after they get back, because they say, oh, nobody used it. And then turns out we get on the boat, and then it's, oh, somebody used it, didn't flush it, you know, because they didn't know. Anyways.
So Dana's exactly right. And it always seems like people try to use the head at the most inopportune times. Like, it's always when you're going upwind and you have too much sail up, so you're trying to reef and there's another boat coming at you and maybe something broke, and then somebody's like, oh, can I go to the bathroom right now? Or they might, like Dana said, they might just sneak below deck, and you'll have absolutely no idea because you're dealing with other stuff. So it's, yeah, definitely good to do a little just quick briefing. The other thing is, if people say that they know how to use a head, like maybe they went on their, you know, uncle's boat at one point 10 years ago, they might think they know how to use a head, but it's always good to just kind of, you know, trust but verify, and make sure you just do a quick, you know, and then you can just say, oh, well, that's great. So it should be really quick, you know. So the nice thing though on all the Catalinas, it does have a list of what to do. So first on the list is open the head intake seacock and waistline cutoff valve. So these are found up in the
Ian,
forepeak.
I think it might be better if you just give Nick the phone at this point.
Okay. Can you guys still hear me with the?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Can you guys see it? It's kind of dark in here.
Not very well. Kind of. Oh yeah, there we go.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, actually, I think Ian's gonna get the. Oh, perfect. Okay, so one of these is going to be the water coming in to the head. We actually have to see which one. Let's see. Let's see which one's which. So, because one's going to be the water coming in, and the other one's going to be the water going to the faucet. Oh, okay, it's the lower one. Okay. So on this boat, this is going to be the line coming in. So the way the head works is it basically brings in raw water and uses the raw water to flush the business down the toilet into a holding tank. So first, you open up this seacock. See how it's now in the vertical position? Just how we had it for the raw water pump. We don't want it like this, because otherwise we won't be able to use the toilet. We want it open. The other thing we want is on the outflow line. We want this to be lined up. Here we go.
When you say outflow, Nick, what do you mean?
Where the poop's going. So the outflow is going to be basically where the what you pump into the toilet comes out. So you're basically pumping this fresh water in from the outside, and then you're using that to push everything that's in the toilet through this big black line up into this holding tank, which is right there. You can also see this line right here. Let's see, get some light on there. Perfect. So this line right here is the line that goes up. I see my camera's switching around. This line that goes up to the deck, where then you pump out at the dock. So, okay. So now we have both the outlet and the inlet open. So we're ready to start pumping the toilet.
Is there for the sink gray water in the head?
No, so the Catalinas don't have gray water. So gray water system is basically stuff that isn't as nasty as stuff straight from the toilet. It's like stuff from the sink, stuff from the shower. Can't really think of anything else. Maybe air conditioning system, drainage, things that probably don't have really nasty bacteria, but you don't want to pump over anyway. Catalina's the 27s don't have anything. Don't have a gray water system.
And I would just like to make a note that in the bay, it is okay for, that stuff to drain, the gray water to go into the bay, right? So sink water is fine, and that just goes directly to the through hole and drains that way.
Well, but that's what I was asking. Is there a seacock on the through hole from the head sink someplace? Yes.
Yeah, underneath the sink.
Okay.
Maybe Nick will show you after the, all right, or now.
No, but isn't there a sink in the head also?
Yes.
Oh, wait.
So just so you guys know that all the Catalinas are slightly different. So they all are in different places.
So this is the sink drain for the main, for the galley sink on this boat.
And how about in the head? I know that in some of the Catalinas in the heads, sometimes
I think it's actually this, it's this one forward. So it's this one right here.
Yeah, so some of them, the Seacock, it's like a dual system where it can pull up raw water and then also drain water into back into the
Yeah, see where,
the back.
so this line's coming down, and then that goes back to, that actually makes more sense, because then the line, I thought that this was, it didn't have fresh water, but I guess this is pumped from fresh water, so. All right, so the actual use of the toilet, and actually I have like 10% battery left, so I think we should be able to get through this.
Nick, we had a question from Peter, which was, does toilet paper go in the bucket, or is it okay to flush it through the head?
So definitely in the bucket. Every captain has something different. Some people are okay with some toilet paper going into the head. It really, the little piece of the toilet paper can mess with the small, it's called the joker valve, which basically keeps the flow from coming back out of the nasty stuff. So you don't want stuff to get clogged in there, and flushing any toilet paper can be really bad.
And so from Spinnaker's perspective, you should never flush anything down the toilet unless it has gone through your body first. And so, with the trash bin, maybe make sure you bring a plastic bag or something to put in the trash bin, so that way you can throw it away afterwards.
So when you actually
also had a question about the macerator. I'll just answer that.
Yeah.
So the macerator is used for getting the waste out of the boat, right? So when you're pumping this stuff out of the boat, but you don't really need a macerator to move stuff from the head into the holding tank, at least not on these boats.
Yeah. No, it's usually, and especially it's a nice thing if you have an electric macerator on a bigger boat that you're living on. It is nice because you don't have to pump every time you go to the bathroom, but this is fine for our purposes. So the first part is to switch this thing to flush mode. On newer ones, this is a slightly older model, it'll have a slightly different looking switch, but the whole point is that you want to be bringing in water from the outside first. So, and we're going to start pumping, and if we did it right, there should be water coming in from the outside. And you can see a little bit of water coming in. So after we pumped it wet, that's called pumping wet, we can go ahead and do our business. After we've done our business, we want to go ahead and actually pump wet again, just a little bit.
Nick, I'm glad that you didn't simulate doing business. That was nice.
Well, everybody's got a limit, right? Like, anyway, after you've done a couple wet pumps, you can go ahead and start drying out. So basically all I'm doing is going from flush mode to dry mode, and all this does is keep water from coming in. So now all I'm doing is just pumping all the liquid that's already there out. This is the one where it's important to pump at least like 10 times. Make sure that everything that's in that line, it's about a 6-foot long line, has made it into the holding tank. If it doesn't, it might kind of seep back into the toilet. Obviously, that's kind of gross. On the newer tanks, they'll have like a little twisting thing. You want to twist it so it's locked into place. This one doesn't. And then you want to leave it in the dry position though, in either case. And then you're done. And you've used the head successfully. Now, when you're done for the day and you're actually back at the dock, you really want to come up back here and make sure you close those valves that you opened. So unlike the raw water valve on the engine, these we do want to close. So we're going to close that one, and we're going to close the line to the nasty stuff. Now the reason why we close the line to this nasty stuff is because if you don't, of course, air can kind of come back in, or even, you know, some residual liquid, and it can make the boat stink a little bit. So it's always a good idea just to close it. The reason why we close these is because if something does break in one of these hoses, cracks or something, it's not going to sink the boat. These holes are below the water line, so if that valve is open and one of these hoses breaks, the boat might sink if the bilge pump can't keep up. So, and that's the head operation. So we can't go over and show the wonders of the pump out dock, but
that'll have to be another seminar.
The what?
That'll have to be another seminar.
A whole seminar on poo. Actually, does this have the key for it?
It should be in the in one of the little boxes there.
There we go.
You could probably get your phone back to Ian.
The what?
You could probably give your phone back to Ian.
Oh, right. Cameraman. So what you would do is go over to the end of C dock and tie up next to it with your starboard side next to the big pump out area. And you can take the waist. Oh, that's pretty tight, isn't it? So on newer boats, they got pretty smart, and instead of having these annoying little key things, they made it so that you open these with winch handle, just like the ones you use in the cockpit. For the older boats, they had to make it hard. Well, anyway, you open this up. Once you open it up, there's basically this big plastic, looks kind of like a suction thing. You turn the pump on. You can actually stick the hose in the water and kind of prime the pump so it's sucking in water. Then there's a lever, and you close that lever, bring the filled hose, stick it on here, open the lever, it starts sucking out all the nasty stuff. Then close the valve, close the hose, and return the entire assembly to the pump out station, and then turn off the pump. So that's kind of hand wavy, but that should have been taught to you in DCC.
Instructions. There's instructions on the pump itself. So when you guys get to the pump out dock, you'll see those instructions.
Yep. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it, unless you want me to go over the mainsail cover and stuff, but that's kind of, it's very similar to the Merit, so.
Does anybody want to see Nick put, do any of the rigging stuff, like where the main sheet is located or the main halyard or any of that
stuff? We could go over the reefing if I have enough battery.
One thing I would point out that was in the checkout procedure is of the emergency tiller.
Oh yeah, so Nick, you want to show them where the emergency tiller is and where that is and how that sets up? That's a good point, James.
So this is the venerable emergency tiller. And on some boats, this will actually be situated such that it goes backwards because there's not enough room between the wheel and the rudder stock. For the Catalinas, there is enough room if you chop the tiller down. So, did everybody see where we got this from? From the lazarette right here?
And that's pretty much where all of them are in the Catalinas.
Yeah. So you slide this on like so. And then look at that. You're back in business. Now, you're going to have a lot less ability to turn the boat because you can see how short this rudder or this tiller is. And I have trouble moving it even when we're at the dock. You likely won't be able to actually sail this way, but hopefully your engine's still working and you should be able to maneuver enough to at least get back to the dock. So this, of course, assumes that your rudder is still attached to the boat. If your rudder is not attached to the boat, there's not much you can do. But this is just, it's some of the wires and the pulley system that's underneath the deck break, and so the wheel no longer works. So.
Nick, we actually had a question about shore power and connecting and disconnecting from shore power.
Sure, and we can go over that. So the biggest thing to remember with shore power is that before you really mess around with it, you want it to be off, meaning that there's no power going through the line from the dock.
And is there a particular time that they should do that? Should they do that before they get on the boat? Should they do it, after they've started up the engine? What's your kind of suggestion?
I mean, I like to do it right before they get on the boat. If the charging system's been working right, it's gonna, it's gonna, have the battery charged up, so you should still be able to charge up the engine. Dana, what's your take?
Yeah, no, that sounds good to me.
Because I know some people, you can cheat if you have a bad battery. You can leave the charging cord plugged in, and that can allow you to start your battery. Of course, if you're going out sailing and your battery is that bad off, maybe you should just get a new battery. So this is the switch system. The rightmost one is just a lamp. This is turning on and off a lamp. Don't worry about that one. The middle one controls the right side. The left one controls the left side. So figure out which one's which. It should be whichever one is pointing to. So Catalina 1 is this side. Turn it off. Now the entire line is dead. We can come over here. Sometimes there should be this little plastic thing. The problem is that these plastic things are often stripped, so they don't work very well. You still want to kind of twist to the left and slowly bring it off. What am I going to say about this one? Make sure you do this as one of the first things when you come out to the dock, because it's very easy to forget about it, get on, do everything else, even take off the dock lines, you'd be surprised, and then pull away from the dock with your electrical cord attached. It's a little less easy to do it here because your dock lines are right next to it, but especially on a lot of modern boats, especially, let's go look at the Catalina real quick. So this is the Catalina 34. You can see how there's really no dock lines back here. It could be very easy for you to start taking out dock lines, get the engine running, pull away from the dock and completely forget about the electrical cord. So it's a good idea, even though you might not be taking out bigger boats for a while, get in the habit of taking out that electrical cord right away. So
we had a boat at the marina that forgot to do that. Not one of our boats, but just a regular tenant, and he somehow destroyed the pedestal because he hadn't disconnected it, and like somehow it was, it was wrapped around the pedestal, so it pulled the whole pedestal up, and the water got all screwed up, and it was not good.
Yeah, no, that can be very.
Looks like his mom might have called again.
Battery.
Oh, his battery's dead. Okay.
Hey, Dana,
Yeah,
we're
find
back
out.
over here.
My phone died. Can you hear me?
I don't know.
Yeah, I can hear, but I think maybe we should wrap it up. So we'll do another session for anybody that wants. I'm kind of thinking we might do like a check-in one for both the Merritts and the Catalinas, because we really spent a lot of time on checking out the boat in both instances, but really didn't talk about checking in. So it's possible we'll do another one. I'm gonna stay and answer a few questions, if that's okay. Just because I know that Nick's phone is dying and Ian's microphone doesn't work all that well. So if Ian, if you want to sign off, I'll continue answering questions here. So Peter had a question. Is there a VHF on the boat? Yes, there is. It is operational, and we encourage you guys to use it if needed.
On the VHF, it seems like some broadcasts on all ships, and the VHF just beeps like nonstop. I just hit like the select button to clear it, but is there some sort of procedure to do?
I'm sorry, what did you say, James, though? What happens all the time? Like you're getting all sorts of traffic and stuff like that?
No, there was like someone put out some sort of alert.
Oh, a
that said all
pon-pon?
ships, and it gave some sort of ID code scrolling across it, and it just beeps, like just a constant tone.
Yeah. So
like
what that is when somebody's EPIRB goes off, it automatically gives a like signal out, so that then like, oh yeah, like if you notice that this boat is in your area, you're supposed to contact them. The way to clear that, what I do is I've turned the radio off and then turn it back on. That usually clears it, although every once in a while, like it will come back on, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it except turn the radio on and off.
I just ended up hitting the select button. There was and it cleared it, but I was going to go power cycle it next, but I wanted to know what the recommended way was to deal with that.
Yeah, so that works too, the select button. But yeah, there's not a whole lot. The reason that they have that is because they want you to pay attention, right? So also Peter was asking, does Spinnaker monitor the VHF? We do have a radio in the office that theoretically we monitor, but the problem is that a lot of us have been in the office when it's been super busy, right? And so you could be calling on the radio, but we've got the phone ringing, we've got customers there, all that. So really the best thing to do is probably call us from your cell phone. And it should be on channel 16. We're monitoring 16 most of the time when we're doing special events. When we do special events, we like sometimes we'll be on 16, like racing or team building. But in general, at the Spinnaker office, we're monitoring. Other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. And I put the checklist in the chat for anybody that wanted to download it. Yeah, Peter, we were talking about reefing. Nick, do you want to, or Ian, do you want to maybe quickly show, I can walk us through verbally, but just show where the reefing system is. I muted you, Ian, mostly because it just got a little bit, there's a lot of background noise there, so it's hard to hear. So on the Catalinas, the reefing systems either have a little hook, like they are on the Merritts, or it has a line for the reefing line near the mast. And so I can't really see. Looks like it's a line. Okay. So basically, you have the tack line that you haul in for that, and you can cleat it off. Make sure it's nice and tight. And then there's also a reefing outhaul line, which reefs to the back of the sail. So Peter, the issue is that Nick's phone died, and his microphone, his special microphone, was paired with his phone. So that's why, yeah, that's why I'm talking as opposed to Nick. So yeah. Ian, does Nick have anything to add to that? Do you think? I don't know what he's really doing over there.
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me?
Barely, and it's very garbled.
Yeah. Of course. I'm good.
Okay. Other questions?
Is there anything when you wrap up that should be remembered besides the maybe hooking up the power cord and
The power cord is something that usually gets forgotten. Although a lot of times we have you guys dock bow first, and you can't hook the power cord up when you dock bow first, which is totally fine. One of the other things that I've noticed, especially now that we've been doing electronic check-in and check-out forms, and I'm seeing the forms like kind of in real time, is that a lot of people are actually leaving the battery switch on, which should not be the case. The battery switch should be turned off, even if the shore power is not connected. The bilge pump is actually wired directly to the batteries. So it doesn't matter if that switch is on or off, the bilge pump will always work. Another thing that I'm trying to think of that comes to mind, hatch boards. I was just talking to Nick about this, that actually sometimes there's problems, charters have problems putting the hatch boards back in. It's probably, if you're having trouble putting them back in, it's probably because they're backwards. So the way that you can tell that the hatch boards are the correct way is the varnish is going to look good really good on one side and not so great on the other. And the side that the varnish looks really good on is the inside, right? Because it's not getting hit by the sun. So that's a good way to tell. Ian, can you ask Nick if he has any other things that he can think of that are good? Yeah, thanks for the hatch boards. If he has any good advice.
No, because really from here on out, it's all very similar to the Merit. You know, but the biggest difference is just the engine and the head. So.
Yeah, make sure that you check the head. The very, very last thing that you do, check the head, because you know a lot of the time people will use the head while you're docking, right? You have no idea that they've used the head. And so, you know, you don't think to check it, but just double check, make sure it's clean, make sure you don't have any surprises and all of that. But yeah, I think that's it. Oh, are there any spare plastic bags for the bucket? No, there are not. You should plan on bringing your own plastic baggie or trash receptacle. So. Well, thank you everybody for joining. And if any of you do want a copy of the recording, I can send you the link if you, you know, if you go out chartering in the next, you know, couple months or something like that, and you kind of want a refresher, no problem for me to send you the link. So.
Thank you for the tutorial. Thanks.